Welcome back to Protect and Serve. I'm Maya May. Mike Fanone, what's good? Our greeting that we're doing.
Um, yeah, I had a relaxing weekend, and I yeah, that I got
That's
ten.
what's good. I want to know, did you get your Korean food? That's all I need to know.
That's a. I actually got Korean food again last night, so I've already had it twice this week.
I'm starting to feel like that's your comfort food. Is Korean barbecue your comfort food?
Korean barbecue, bibimbap, yeah, all Korean food,
All right.
all Asian food really. So yeah, I've had my fix, and sushi tonight. So
All right, I'm hungry. We're just going to turn this into a food review show. We're starting off by saying what's good, y'all, because as you know, there's a lot going on that isn't so good. And in order to keep myself from losing my mind, I am trying to turn every moment into a gratitude journal. So that's why we're starting out with what's good. So I want to roll from Grammy weekend, something that was good, and then we'll go from there.
yeah, Grammy weekend was great.
Before I say thanks to God, I'm gonna say eyes out.
Just a refreshing weekend, a brief moment of goodness in a fucking maelstrom. Of absolute crazy. Before we even get into everything, and tonight, guys, we're going to talk about the warehousing of people, the DHS bill, Don Lemon's arrest, Minneapolis, they're pulling out troops. I call them troops because I feel like troops, pulling out officers. But the Epstein files dropped since we were, or at least half of them it did, drop since the last time we were here. And I'm asking myself, because our show is called Protect and Serve and it's supposed to be about law and order and things. Mike, how are people expected to follow the rules when the apparent people who are running the world are not following the rules? Like, we're locking up kids and these pedophiles are roaming the streets.
I mean, I think you're starting to see a lot more civil disobedience. I think people are becoming, even centrists and folks that have shied away from protest. There's a lot of this administration is inspiring a lot of first time protesters, myself included. And people are starting to wake up to the fact that there is, a clear double standard here. That folks that are in support of this administration, even if they engage in acts of violence or other type of criminal behavior, whether it's fraud or child sexual assault, enjoy immunity from prosecution because Trump's Department of Justice answers only to him. But the rest of us, we still have to adhere to the laws. In fact, we actually have to not only adhere to the law, but we have to shy away from using our First Amendment protected speech or engaging in the crime of journalism because we'll be prosecuted by this administration.
Yeah, I mean, and that's what's so stunning. And you're right about the radicalization of the average American right now, because people are starting to get fed up. And I think it's the stress of the economy not improving as well. I think that the weight of that in understanding how people are suffering on a day-to-day basis, and then also seeing fraudsters get off, also seeing people in the Trump administration just wantonly break the law, has caused people to reach a breaking point. From what I'm seeing, just even in chats, casual chats with friends and on social media, is that people are fed up. Women in particular were really, really fed up. And a lot of these, signal groups that have the people organizing in them are moms, and they're moms of kids. And so in particular, over the last several days of seeing these men sort of excuse away what originally was what they got elected on, and then also at the same time say, we're going to detain 600 plus kids. That right there is enraging to I would like to think any parent, but hopefully parents who profess to care about children, liberty. Like, where are the moms? Remember the moms for liberty? What happened to them?
Yeah, I think they're still busy burning trans books and, trying to clean up the education system in America and make sure that there's 10 commandments in every classroom. Interestingly enough, a lot of the behavior of the MAGA movement seems to violate those 10 commandments. I mean, listen, it's been a long time since I was inside of a church, but I grew up in Catholic school. I still remember some of the stories. This is not the way that they would say.
I think someone said that Trump's name is in the Epstein files more than Jesus's name is in the Bible.
Oh, there's like a whole meme thing going on with like Trump's name is in there, more in the Epstein files more times than Jesus is in the Bible. I saw another one. Trump's name is in the Epstein files more than Harry Potter is mentioned in all the Harry Potter books.
I have to laugh because otherwise I would be not crying at this point, but screaming with rage. And of course, they don't want the journalists to cover it. So back to the Don Lemon story really quickly, because I know you two are friends, and this all happened after our last show. And you called it because we were talking about what charges they might bring. Can you go over that again? Because it's a little insane that this is actually what ended up happening.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think if you're probably everybody at this point is familiar with, kind of the event that inspired this arrest. But Don Lemon was in Minnesota and he was covering the protests against ICE. And he, my understanding is that he caught wind of a protest that was going to be taking place inside of a church where one of the pastors at that church also happened to be a supervisory special agent with ICE and DHS. And so the person who was actually in charge of coordinating the removal of immigrants, undocumented immigrants in the state of Minnesota was also a person who claimed to be a man of God. And so that obviously upset a lot of people and they planned a protest. And Don was there as a journalist covering the protest and then was arrested. And we talked about this offline, and I've talked about it quite a few times, even with Don. This administration wanted to charge a person of color with a violation of the FACE Act. And for those of you that are not familiar, FACE Act is federal law that was put in place to combat the Ku Klux Klan. And so obviously the irony there is that a law that was passed to combat a terrorist organization made up of white Christian nationalists is now being used against people of color, journalists, for covering newsworthy events in a church.
Now, And keep in mind that if anybody has been following this, they know that Don Lemon, his attorneys offered to turn himself in. He offered to turn himself in. There was no need for spectacle. There was no need for them to ambush him. I believe it was in the lobby of the hotel over Grammy weekend. And so this just again goes to the administration wanting to make a spectacle out of everything because they want to inflame the emotions of the American people. And the White House itself, on the eve, not the eve, but a few days before Black History Month, had the nerve to post a picture of Don Lemon with the line, yes, here it is, "When life gives you lemons." And I don't know if you can see that, but those are two chain emojis. Chain emojis.
I mean, but
go ahead.
That's part of it. The attempted humiliation, embarrassment. They know that it's as strong of a person as Don Lemon is. Knowing that you are up against the full bore of the federal government is stressful. I mean, it was all designed as an attempt to embarrass him. And it's really just, this is a personal vendetta coming from Donald Trump. But I want to talk about, the turning himself in and that element of it. I have been a part of homicide investigations of people who were suspected of committing murder, who were allowed to turn themselves in because they were already represented by counsel when the indictment came down. Don Lemon, of course, is not charged with a violent crime, has no criminal history. And so that just speaks to the, what's the word I'm looking for?
The cravenness, the callousness,
exactly, that of this administration, that he would not simply be afforded the opportunity to turn himself in. And part of that was, if you book the guy late at night, he's going to spend the night in jail because there's no magistrate available. His court appearance won't occur until the following day. And so that's all part of the humiliation. It's all a part of, the vendetta against, Don Lemon, simply because Don Lemon is someone who tells it like it is and speaks out against the administration.
Yeah, and I don't think they were expecting the backlash that they got from it. I'm sure in many ways they did it. The timing of it was really interesting because it happened at the same time as the Epstein files were about to drop. But I actually want to pull that image up one more time because I want to point something out about the language used. For involvement in the St. Paul Church riots. I'm sorry, riots? Riots. Mike, you saw the video of what happened in the church. We all saw the video. If anybody in the comments saw a riot, please let me know, because what I saw was not a riot.
No, I mean, it absolutely was not a riot. It was not a riot in, colloquial terms, and it was not a riot by law enforcement standards. That is a complete and utter lie. But we hear those types of that terminology used by this administration all the time. We heard Greg Bavino use it to justify, the murder and the, execution of Alex Preddy. He declared that scene to be a riot against law enforcement. It was not a riot by any standard. We hear people like Tom Homan refer to the agents who are deployed to Minneapolis as being in theater, which is a term that's used for military personnel who are deployed overseas to a war zone. So they like to use this terminology to make it as if they are at war, that they are in a combat scenario. Because to be honest with you, this administration has declared war on the American people. So in many ways, I guess it's fitting.
I was going to say earlier when I misspoke, I realized I was like, am I really? Because most people who are paying attention are now classifying it as that. And if we remember, going back to the speech that I believe that was Hegseth gave to the generals, and then Trump spoke afterwards, he said, we're going to practice on American cities. We're going to deploy into American cities. And so I think that was right before they brought a Black Hawk helicopter in and had agents scaling down an apartment building in Chicago. And so that is, in fact, what we are seeing. And speaking of the Preddy story, as many of you know, the two agents who shot their weapons, who allegedly murdered him, which it has now been ruled a homicide, not by the federal government, but by the Hennepin County commission. They said that it was a homicide. Now, the agents weren't revealed by the government. They were hidden by the government. It actually took reporting by ProPublica to reveal those names. And they are, again, not two people who were new on the job. These were two men, Jesus Ochoa and Raimundo Gutierrez, who have been agents for, I think, 10 years, around 10 years, each of them. So seeing those two people, again, this is why they hate journalists, right? because the government had no, and I'm assuming they probably sent them back to Texas, which is where they're from, South Texas. In no way, shape, or form should two people who have been doing this work for this long find themselves in a situation on a Minnesota street where they're executing somebody in broad daylight.
Yeah, I mean, there's two things that kind of come to mind for me. Is number one, ICE, CBP do not belong in this type of a role, enforcing laws in this way. That's just blatantly obvious. The other thing is, even as they are tasked in their normal capacity enforcing laws on the border, I think that, or enforcing immigration on the border, this raises some pretty serious questions in my mind about how these people are treating undocumented immigrants who are trying to come into this country, whether it's lawfully or illegally, whatever the case may be. They just seem to be an agency that is ill-equipped and a horrible representation of the United States government to foreigners or to U.S. citizens that are simply crossing the border legally and lawfully. There's a problem here, and it's a lot. It's much bigger than what we've seen play out on American streets. This agency has a deep issue with the type of people that they hire, the conduct that they allow. This is something that is, goes from the bottom all the way up to the top. And it clearly has existed for quite some time because, like you said, these guys have been agents for a decade. I mean, this goes back, probably through, both Republican and Democratic administrations.
Yeah, the fact that they're now also talking about sending ICE, and they say this is just in a security format to just protect the delegation from the US. They're going to send them to Milan, and the people in Italy revolted. Like, there were protests over the weekend. They changed the name of one of the places that was a part of the Olympics. It was going to be called, it was the US pavilion, and it was going to be called Ice House. They changed it to Winter House. This is not looking good on the international stage by any means. And I think that's when you're in the thick of it, it's really difficult to understand how it's being perceived. But even within the US, people who were previously for this administration are now speaking up against it. And the polling numbers, I think we have a clip that talks about kind of the American reaction to it.
This comes as new polling shows that the public is turning against ICE in larger numbers. NPR found 65% of Americans think the agency has gone too far. Reuters has that number at 62%. And now a new battle is emerging over warehouses that DHS is buying to detain thousands of immigrants, sparking protests and pushback nationwide from Arizona to Texas to New Jersey. But even
so, I'm still wondering who the 30+% of people who don't think people are getting murdered. So I'm confused as to who would think that they're not going too far. But those numbers are why the appropriations bill they had to split everything apart, because they're saying, wait, how can we give more money to this and then also try to stay in office come midterm time? Because the American people are completely fed up.
Well, I mean, I don't think that there was ever an intention for, this might be a conversation for another episode, but there's no intention, in my opinion, for this administration to engage in free and fair elections. You already have talk, not just from fringe people like Steve Bannon, but from Donald Trump himself about nationalizing our elections. And that is literally the most un-American thing that anyone can say. If you go back to the foundation of this country, the states decided collectively to come together as part of the United States of America obviously giving some authority to the federal government to represent them abroad, and then within this. But the elections themselves belong to the states, and that's how it should be. Anything other than that is tyranny.
Yeah, I have my pocket constitution right here, and it's in here. It's in here. I'm telling everybody, get one of these, carry it around with you, reference it, because.
I mean, that's why I keep telling people, I keep telling elected leaders, lawmakers on the Democratic Party, stop pretending like you have something to lose. Stop pretending like you have something to lose in the midterm elections, because I don't believe that that's going to happen. Steve Bannon says we're going to deploy ICE to every polling station in every Democratic state in this country, and we're going to surround those polling stations. What do you think that's going to be for? We had the FBI conduct a raid on a state polling center, removing all of the state voter data from the 2020 election, and Tulsi Gabbard was there.
Meanwhile, actual predators are roaming free. And I think in that clip, they talked about the warehouses. And I think it's really important to talk about this, especially leading up into the midterms. These warehouses, the capacity is around 80,000. And so the idea is they're supposed to process the undocumented people and deport them. But the system is already at a breaking point. And so I'm starting to think, Mike, that this was never about deporting people, that this was always about creating a sort of chaos so that they could have an excuse to put in the Insurrection Act or to put into martial law, because the system itself is at a breaking point. They're having issues with arrests. They're having issues with the actual detention of people, as in not allowing any federal oversight into the facilities. We've heard reports of measles outbreaks in the facilities, of sexual assaults in the facilities. We have a lawyer for the DOJ in Minneapolis who said the system is such at a breaking point that she's exhausted. She wants to be held in contempt just so she can get a nap, a 24-hour long nap, I believe is what she said she needed. And so it feels like they are purposely breaking the system from all angles so that they can create an unrest, so that they can have an excuse to say, oh, well, we have to clamp down on elections come midterms because there's chaos.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I think the broader motivation here, and this goes back to my point, in Donald Trump hates America. Donald Trump's whole purpose for running, other than to avoid prison time, was for retribution against America. And that includes MAGA. He hates everyone because he lost the 2020 election. He knows it. And this election cycle, or this administration for him, is about destroying America. It's about destroying everything that we love about this country. It's about destroying our relationship with ourselves, all the institutions that keep us free. He is burning it all to the ground. And part of that, I think, is that he knew that this carrying out deportations in the way that he has directed his administration to do, or Stephen Miller has directed the administration to do, would inevitably cause the reaction that it has caused amongst the American people. This 3,000 a day arrest quota is insane. Mm-hmm. And it was inevitable that we would have victims like Alex Preddy, like Renee Good, like the countless other individuals, like the 270 people that were sent to CCOT. All of those things were absolutely inevitable. And I think that this, a byproduct of that is that he has created this militia of, armed soldiers, in many cases, as well equipped as the American military, less disciplined, but as well equipped. And they're also building a prison structure that is run by this same militia. And whether that's, to house undocumented immigrants. And I actually, I shouldn't call it a prison system. They're concentration camps. Exactly. They don't meet the standards of the American prison system. They are concentration camps. They are designed so that undocumented immigrants that are housed there give up all hope of, becoming American citizens and self-deport. And I think they're being created so that they can inevitably detain American citizens who, engage in criminal behavior like Don Lemon, journalism, free speech, things like that. I think these concentration camps have been created for.
Yeah, I think the fact that they're retrofitting warehouses that were not zoned initially for holding people should be alarming. And it's alarming enough that Timothy Snyder is speaking about it and asking, do we want to be a nation of concentration camps? And so when one of the leading voices in understanding authoritarianism is speaking about it in such plain terms, it should give us all pause for concern, especially under the expanding definition of what is domestic terrorism. The country is now requesting social media records of people who are suspected to have been speaking out about the government. And so I know a lot of people at home might be going, oh, well, this won't affect me because I don't go out and protest, or this won't affect me because I am staying in my lane. But I want people to flash forward to a couple of years more of this administration in which the economy continues to falter and AI continues to take these entry level and middle class jobs and even upper middle class jobs. And people decide they want to exercise their right to protest. Only now, when you go out and protest, they have well-funded militarized police in the streets to tamp down on those protests. And you've already been labeled a domestic terrorist because of the work that they're doing now and the executive orders that are being written now. And so that's what makes me nervous. I say, oh, these facilities aren't just for undocumented immigrants or even for high-profile journalists, but they're for the average American who decides they want to use their voice at some point in the near future.
Right. I used to say when I was a cop that it's every American's God-given right to complain about their fucking boss. And I used to do it, and I would exercise that right frequently. I have talked to countless federal workers who believe that they were targeted, whether it was through DOJ cuts or afterwards, by supervisors because of their dislike for the current administration, some of whom even supported Donald Trump in this last election cycle, but were pissed off about, the way that things started off, even at the very beginning. And so, the idea that it wouldn't affect everyone is insane to me. It's coming for you. And if you don't believe it, read a fucking book. There's plenty of examples of this throughout the course of history. If you don't like Nazi Germany, there's fucking 1,000 other tales of this exact, moment in time playing out over and over and over again. Fucking educate yourself.
Yeah, and I think the difference now, and the book I'm reading this February is about police violence and the 1968 act that Lyndon B. Johnson put into place to provide federal funding for police, local police, so that they could expand and purchase the kind of equipment that they use to crush communities now. And so that laid the groundwork, the foundation for the mass incarceration of the African American community, of Mexican American community, Puerto Ricans. Like they literally are doing the exact same thing, only now they're expanding it to everybody. And it's quite scary, to be honest with you. And I want people to have hope. And so I want to talk about the pushback that's happening, Mike, because there is pushback as communities are starting to find out about these warehouses in their areas. And so this is the time now where a lot of local ordinances are being broken or being bent. And if you are in a city, and I think it's somewhere around 18 different states or so, I'm not sure of the numbers, but if you are in a city where they are trying to kind of push these warehouses through, and they're labeling them federal facilities as a way to sort of skirt the local ordinances. Look into what's happening in your city. And this is the time now to push your local, how does it act locally? Think globally, act locally. Push your local reps to say, hey, we're not doing this here. We're not doing this in our city. And I don't know if they're going to try to, well, this is going to bring jobs. I'm like, at what cost?
Yeah. What jobs is this going to, what jobs is this going to bring? And where have we seen an example of that ever? Yeah, I just, I don't buy it. And I agree. People need to get engaged. People need to stay engaged. And people need to mentally prepare themselves for when this inevitably comes to your town, especially if you're a town that has, what the administration refers to as these sanctuary city policies, which is just, absolute bullshit, a way to kind of twist what I have always looked at as a law enforcement officer as ICE, when I was a cop, it was INS, not doing their fucking job. Like as a local law enforcement officer, I have a job. My job, has a hell of a lot of responsibilities as a local police officer. Even other federal agencies have, a variety of responsibilities. ICE has one responsibility: immigration enforcement. You do your fucking job. We, the law enforcement officers of this country, will do our job. This idea that, these cities, like what these policies are is simply that we don't go out and ask people for their immigration status when we encounter them, nor should we. We've got to be the police for everybody. I've already spoken to this ad nauseum about how, we have undocumented communities in all of these different cities, but they are victims of crimes too. And they're witnesses to crimes. And they, the Constitution says that they deserve some rights as, for simply living here. And they certainly deserve to be safe. And that's the bare fucking minimum.
Do you think people are making that connection more and more, that this is not about public safety and never has been? Because as we're seeing, people who were very much rooted in the community. So, for example, undocumented immigrants contribute to their economy. And if you remove them for whatever reason, if you remove people who are integrated into a neighborhood, into a system, it disrupts things. And so this is happening all over the place. Yeah. But are people understanding that it's not about safety and that it never has been?
I think some people are starting to come to that conclusion. I mean, you still have this whole right-wing media ecosystem that, perpetuates these lies about the fact that, all of these resources are spent on undocumented immigrants and they don't pay taxes and blah, 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 blah. And it's all fucking bullshit. I mean, unfortunately, I think what's really, brought people around to recognize that it was never about public safety is American citizens being victimized under this administration, specifically ICE and CBP. I mean, I hate to be that fucking callous, but unfortunately, we didn't see these massive fucking protests, initially. It really wasn't until we started hearing stories about American citizens being detained and, going into neighborhoods of color simply because they were neighborhoods of color and not because of, the immigration enforcement aspect of it. And then finally, the execution and the, assassination of American citizens at the hands of, these rogue militiamen that are working for the Trump administration.
Well, and it's interesting because I was in LA when everything sort of popped off. And I think people at that time, especially people maybe in the Midwest or smaller towns, were like, oh, that's those crazy coastal elites, those Angelenos, those rabble rousers, those people. And it would never touch on our communities in this way. And so I think that speaks to the sort of radicalization as this has continued. And now just, we're all, domestic terrorists and radicals apparently now, because we're saying, oh, no, you guys were actually violating the Constitution. I think, I try to remember, it was Mike Johnson. It was Mike Johnson who said, well, what are we supposed to do? Basically, what do we have to get judicial warrants for all of them?
I'm glad you brought that up. Aren't you a fucking lawyer, Mike Johnson? Like, aren't you a fucking lawyer? Yes. You have to get your judicial warrant if you want to go arrest somebody for an what is essentially an administrative, I'm not even going to call it a fucking crime issue. It boggles the fucking mind how, I get it. Like, he's an insurrectionist. He's all in on this white nationalist agenda. But you're a lawyer, or at least you are for now.
That's the fact that they're so boldly basically say their case to the American people, and it seems like it's working with a lot of MAGA, is, hey, let's suspend civil rights. Let's suspend the Constitution so that we can get these undocumented people out, even though that's not actually effectively what they're doing. And so, like, how many rights are people willing to give up for their racism?
Yeah, no, there was a great interview in the Atlantic. Everybody should go read it. If you remember from, maybe a decade ago, was it Eamon Bundy, who was a part of the kind of militia movement?
Idaho?
Yeah. And, he was talking about how like he went up against BLM, not the Black Lives Matter movement, but the Bureau of Land Management. For grazing. His father was a cattle rancher. They've been grazing on this land for, fucking decades, like centuries in their family. And the federal government basically came in and said, no, you don't get to do that anymore. And, there was like a standoff, an armed standoff, which eventually the federal government de-escalated by leaving, because they realized that this is only going to escalate into a situation where more people die, the opposite of the way that this administration behaves. But nevertheless, he was talking about how all of his former compatriots are now like buying into this. They were all about states' rights at that time and limited federal government, involvement in their daily lives. And now you've got all these guys that were a part of that movement that are celebrating the federalization of everything, and the federal government coming in and intervening, without the request of state governments, and he was just like, it boggles my mind.
So the end goal. And thinking about the fact that they just tried to revoke TPS status for Haitians, and a judge had to halt that. I don't know where that stands right now. And so people who came here legally, who followed the law, who've been following the law, were going to be subject to removal. Meaning you could have that chaos in Florida. You could have that chaos in Springfield, Ohio, where there are plenty of Haitian immigrants. And so it really is about the whiteification of America, which is why the Bundys of the world seem to be okay with it. Is they're like, let's just get out all the black and brown people and then everything will be fine. And we've talked about this on the show before, Mike. There are so many of us that in order to pull that off, first of all, it's just impossible to pull off. And so it just, to me, again, goes, this is what they're doing to distract everyone while they extract more money from the economy, while billionaires line their pockets so that they can build their little bunkers and escape off once the climate collapses.
Yeah. I mean, this administration is retribution and about draining America of all of its resources and lining the pockets of the billionaires that propped up Donald Trump. And we can't forget protecting pedophiles. Because a lot of those same billionaires, it seems, have found their way into hundreds, if not thousands, of pages of the Epstein files, and in some pretty sick and twisted ways.
Yeah, I think Marjorie Taylor Greene, having been privy to what was in the Epstein files and realizing that she had been duped as far as her commitment to MAGA and MAGA protecting children. And I have a feeling that was also part of why she decided to leave instead of stay and fight, but whatever. But speaking of leaving, it seems like a lot of ICE agents are feeling the pressure and are not liking their jobs, maybe partly because they're not getting their bonuses as they had been promised. But there is a forum, it's reported in Wired magazine, there's a forum in which they are taking their grievances. We have some slides from that I want to pull up. Or maybe we don't have some slides from that. Let's see if we have them. Okay, if we don't have the slides.
I don't think it should come as a surprise to anybody that Donald Trump is not paying paying his contractors, so to speak. He has a long, well-documented history of just not paying people and telling them to fuck off. I knew, I used to work construction before I became a cop, and I knew a bunch of guys that were still in the construction industry when Trump turned the old post office in Washington, D.C. into the Trump Hotel. And a lot of those guys never got paid. And these were small independent contractors whose entire livelihoods depended upon, getting the money from these contracts. And many of them went completely under and out of business.
I remain bewildered. I have nothing nice to say these days, these last 3 days. I've done all the meditation, I've done all the boxing in an effort to have something nice to say, Mike. But when I saw that the ICE agents were upset that they hadn't been paid, I was like, oh, well, too fucking bad. Boo hoo. Quit your job.
I got no sympathy. Exactly. Quit your fucking job. It's easy. Quit your job. You don't make that much money. You can go get another job that's going to pay you, reasonably. I mean, listen, you're not going to be able to fulfill your sadistic, fantasies maybe in the same way, but you can go get another paying job where not just the entire country or the vast majority of the country, but the vast majority of the planet hates you. They hate you.
They hate you.
And when they find out who you are, your life is going to be really uncomfortable for a really long time, probably until you leave the earth. And it's the same message for that poor, overworked lawyer. You want a nap? Quit your fucking job. You're a lawyer, for Christ's sakes. You don't make that much money in the federal government. Go work for a private law firm.
I think that is a perfect place to wrap up, because I feel like quit your job needs to be the refrain. I love the idea of going out there with a loudspeaker. I think we had people in Minneapolis doing that this weekend. And so we will end on that clip if we have it. I don't know that we do though now, because I know we lost Sam. And so he's got all of our clips. But know this, a good way to protest is letting these ICE agents know that they can, in fact, quit their jobs and go find something else to do. Gardening, I don't care. Anything else but this. So thank you guys for joining us. We will be back next week, and hopefully it'll be a chill week between now and then, so that I can not feel like I'm losing my mind, which is what I feel like I'm losing my mind at this point. Good night.
See you guys next week.